Time has softened these images, but not their stories. Fame fades, whispers remain. Every frame hides something forgotten. This is Velvet Screen Secrets. Each day I bring you a new story about Hollywood's golden age and the stars who defined it. Nobody saw that statement coming. Not from her, not like that. When the news first hit about Rob Reiner, everyone in Hollywood braced for the same polished plastic statements. You know the type, those robotic PR lines filled with thoughts and prayers and respect their privacy nonsense. But what Sally Struthers did yesterday? That wasn't PR spin, it wasn't media coaching, it was pure, unfiltered heartbreak spilling out in real time. It was so raw, it almost felt wrong to watch. You could see the pain shaking through her words, like she'd been holding it in for months. This wasn't just a co-star mourning another Hollywood legend, this was family pain. Sally wasn't just acting beside Rob back in the All in the Family days, she grew up with him. She was Gloria, he was Meathead, and that bond went way beyond the lights and cameras. That was real love, real loyalty, and clearly, real secrets too. Because what Sally just dropped, it flipped everything we thought we knew about Rob Reiner's final months. And here's where it gets wild. Her confession lines up almost perfectly with the quiet chatter that's been seeping out of Tom Cruise's circle for the past 2 days. We're not just talking about another Hollywood tragedy here. Sally's words point to something way darker, a hidden story of control and silence that may have been buried for years. Right behind the iron gates of one of Brentwood's most talked-about mansions, the real story starts to unfold, and it's heavy. You have to understand, Sally Struthers didn't stay quiet out of guilt or fear. She stayed silent to protect Rob's dignity. But yesterday, that silence shattered. She confessed she couldn't hold back anymore because the truth about Rob's son, Nick Reiner, had to come out, no matter who it exposed. When Sally spoke, her whole body was trembling. It wasn't just sorrow spilling out, it was years of built-up rage, pain, and guilt exploding all at once. And then she dropped a line that froze the entire room cold. Quoting her directly, Sally said, "We all saw the bruises on his soul, but we were too afraid to ask about the bruises on his arms." That sentence hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't just metaphorical, it sounded like a warning, a cry, and a confession all at once. She went on to describe their last lunch together, just 3 weeks before everything fell apart. That meeting now feels like a goodbye neither of them wanted to face. Sally said Rob wasn't the loud, confident, fiery director everyone remembered. Instead, he looked small, haunted, like the world had drained the life out of him. She noticed he kept checking his phone every couple of minutes, jumping at every buzz. And when she finally asked if something was wrong, Rob looked up with empty, tired eyes and said, "I don't know how to stop him, Sal. I love him, but I'm terrified of him." Those were Rob's exact words. And at first, Sally thought he was talking about some Hollywood producer or maybe a rival in politics. But when that phone call came, the one telling her Rob and Michelle were gone, everything clicked. He wasn't talking about an outsider. He was talking about his own son. That realization shattered her. And here's where things take a shocking turn, because out of nowhere, Tom Cruise steps into the picture. Sounds wild, right? But stay with me, because this piece ties everything together in ways the mainstream outlets are still too scared to touch. Rob Reiner and Tom Cruise weren't just casual acquaintances, they went back decades. A Few Good Men wasn't just a hit, it built a lifelong bond between them. Cruise, being the hyper-focused, sharp-eyed guy he is, had always looked out for Rob behind the scenes. Now, according to insiders close to the investigation, people speaking only under strict anonymity, Cruise actually staged what they're calling an intervention back in November. Supposedly, he had stopped by the Reiner home for what was meant to be a friendly chat about a potential new project. But that meeting spiraled into something much darker. Instead of scripts and ideas, Cruise walked into chaos, a heated fight between Nick and Michelle. Sources say Nick was shouting, demanding access to a trust fund that had been frozen because of his personal struggles. And in that moment, Cruise didn't back down.
Eyewitness whispers claim he physically stepped in, positioning himself between Nick and his mother, like a real-life action scene playing out in the middle of their living room. The leaked details from that day are nothing short of chilling. Insiders say Tom Cruise was deeply shaken. He reportedly told someone close to him that the look in Nick's eyes was vacant and dangerous. That's coming from Tom Cruise, a guy who's seen chaos on and off screen. He allegedly pulled Rob aside and set it straight. You are not safe in this house. You need to get him out, or you need to get out. Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine that. One of the most powerful men in Hollywood, a man who's seen every kind of madness the industry can throw, warning a longtime friend to run from his own home. That's how intense it was. But heartbreakingly, Rob did what so many parents do when love blinds them. He defended his son. He told Tom, "He's sick. We can't abandon him. He just needs one more chance." That single line hits hard now, knowing how it all ended. Yesterday, Sally Struthers confirmed this tragic cycle. She broke down mid-interview, crying as she admitted that Rob's endless compassion was what ultimately destroyed him. She said Rob carried guilt like a weight, blaming himself for everything that went wrong. According to Sally, Rob had started slipping away from everyone, canceling plans, avoiding calls, cutting ties with old friends from All in the Family. The few castmates still around even tried setting up a small reunion dinner recently, but Rob turned them down. Sally said she got so worried she drove by his house just a week ago to see for herself. She said all the blinds were shut tight in the middle of the day. The place looked dark, locked down, more like a bunker than a home. She texted him, "I'm outside," hoping he'd open the door. Hours later, he finally replied, "Not a good time. He's home." Those two words still haunt her, because now everyone knows exactly who he was. He's home. Just two words, but they hit like a punch to the chest. Those words meant danger, exhaustion, and fear, all wrapped into one. And what makes Sally's revelation even more jaw-dropping is the money trail she exposed. We always imagine Hollywood families swimming in cash, immune to financial trouble. But addiction doesn't care how rich you are. It eats through money, respect, and sanity until there's nothing left.
According to Sally, Rob had been quietly selling off pieces of his life, not to fund another movie, but to cover Nick's spiraling debts. We're talking gambling losses, sketchy loans, and payouts to some very dangerous people, the kind of folks you never want knocking on your door in Brentwood. Rob wasn't throwing money away for luxury. He was literally paying for peace, trying to keep his son alive, buying safety that never really existed. Because as Sally heartbreakingly put it, Rob was so busy keeping the wolves away, he didn't realize the wolf was already inside the house. Then came the story that made the entire room go silent. Sally said there's one specific accident the police are now reviewing, something that might have been the first real warning sign before everything fell apart. Around 6 months ago, during a family gathering, Rob supposedly fell down the stairs. That was the official story. He broke his wrist, had bruises all over his face. Everyone accepted it, but Sally didn't. She visited him in the hospital and said, "I looked at his face, and the bruising wasn't from a fall. It was shaped like a hand." That's when she asked, "Did Nick do this?" Rob didn't answer. He just turned his head, tears sliding down, refusing to say a word. They never spoke about it again. Sally said that silence, the silence of parents suffering abuse from their own children, is the loudest, most heartbreaking sound there is. It's the kind of pain nobody ever wants to admit, the kind that's wrapped in shame so deep it suffocates you. How do you even begin to tell the world that the same baby you cradled, the boy you raised, is now the one hurting you? That's a nightmare no parent ever wants to live. And what makes this story even more tragic is what Tom Cruise tried to do to stop it all. Sources close to the situation say Tom was devastated. He had actually offered to step in to cover the cost for a top-tier, high-security rehab facility in Switzerland, the kind reserved for the most extreme, hard-to-treat cases. He literally told Rob, "I'll handle it. Let me take the burden off you."
But Nick refused to go, and Rob, being the loving father he was, couldn't bring himself to force him. That choice now feels like the moment everything tilted toward disaster. Apparently, Tom told friends afterward, "I watched a slow-motion car crash for 2 years and couldn't stop it." That quote alone says it all: the helplessness, the frustration, the guilt. But now, as Nick's defense team starts spinning their version of events, they're already pushing a narrative about mental health and a supposed snap in reality. Sally Struthers, though, isn't buying any of it. She made it clear yesterday that this wasn't some random breakdown. She believes it was calculated. She spoke about how Nick knew exactly which emotional buttons to press to get what he wanted. One minute, he'd be calm, charming, and remorseful, acting like the loving son Rob still wanted to believe in. He'd apologize, promise change, and play the part perfectly, just long enough to get a check signed or a lock undone. And then, in Sally's words, the mask would slip. That's when the real Nick showed up, and Rob was trapped all over again. It wasn't just chaos, it was full-blown psychological torture. Rob and Michelle were trapped in what friends now call a domestic war zone, living every day on edge. But here's the real question that everyone's whispering. Why are we only hearing from Sally Struthers and those quiet leaks tied to Tom Cruise now? Where were all the other so-called friends? Simple. Hollywood hides its own pain. The industry protects its image like a shield, and it's terrified of scandal. Nobody wanted to admit that the cheerful, beloved Rob Reiner was secretly living a nightmare behind closed doors. But Sally, she's done staying quiet. At 77, she's got nothing left to lose, and she made it clear she doesn't care about Hollywood politics anymore. She's buried her brother, watched too many people she loved fall apart, and now all she wants is truth and justice. She flat out called out the people who kept Nick's chaos going, the friends who kept feeding his habits, the doctors who kept signing off on those shady prescriptions, and the legal system that kept letting him off easy because of his famous last name. Sally didn't hold back for a second. And one of the most gut-wrenching moments she shared was about Michelle Singer Reiner, the one person who tried desperately to hold the family together. Everyone always focused on Rob, but Michelle was the shield, the peacemaker, the one constantly standing in the middle trying to calm the storm. Sally said Michelle once confessed to her something that still makes her shake. She had started locking her bedroom door at night. Just think about that for a second. Locking your own door in your own house, not because of a stranger, but because you're afraid of your own child. That's not just fear, that's pure heartbreak. Michelle once told Sally, "I wake up to the sound of footsteps in the hall, and my heart stops." That single line paints the whole picture. Fear had become their daily reality. They weren't living in that Brentwood mansion, they were trapped in it. Prisoners in their own home, and the person holding the keys wasn't a stranger, it was their own son. Rob and Michelle had given everything, absolutely everything, to save him, and it cost them everything in return. The night of the tragedy, according to the detailed timeline Sally's pieced together from detectives, wasn't some sudden outburst. It was a slow, terrifying siege. Investigators now believe Nick had been unraveling for at least 3 straight days before it all went down. Neighbors later admitted they heard shouting, doors slamming, and loud crashes echoing through the Reiner property for almost 48 hours straight. But here's the haunting part. Nobody called the police. Why? Because in places like Brentwood, you don't call the cops on your famous neighbors. You turn up your music, pretend not to notice, and keep your image polished. That kind of polite silence cost lives. And then there's the bombshell from Tom Cruise's leaked information. He claims that on that final night, Rob did try to get help, but not from 911. Reports show he made a desperate call to a private security firm instead. That call was logged at 9:15 p.m. The guard team didn't arrive until 9:45 p.m. Just 30 minutes, but that half hour changed everything. Within that narrow window, everything Rob and Michelle had built, their love, their family, their peace, was wiped away. That's the moment the world ended for the Reiner family. Sources say Tom Cruise is absolutely furious about what happened that night, especially about the slow response from the security team. He's been questioning why nobody recognized how urgent that call was. But deep down, investigators believe the real reason comes down to Rob himself. He probably didn't let on how bad things really were. On the phone, he likely said something like, "My son's having an episode. Can you send someone?" Instead of shouting what he should have, "He's going to kill us." Even in that final, desperate moment, Rob couldn't bring himself to paint his son as a threat. He didn't want Nick arrested, he just wanted him calm.
There's something heartbreakingly human about that. That instinct parents have to protect their child, even when it means risking everything. Sally said it best. Rob died trying to be a father, and that one sentence destroys you. The autopsy confirmed defensive wounds on Michelle. She fought to survive. But Rob? Almost none. He didn't even raise his hands. He just stood there, taking it. That's the part that breaks everyone. This man, who spent his whole life fighting for justice, equality, and compassion, couldn't bring himself to fight back when the danger came from his own blood. The thought of Rob Reiner, the voice of conscience for an entire generation, meeting his end with mercy instead of rage, is unbearable. Now, as Nick sits in custody, the real storm is just beginning. The legal war. It's going to be brutal. Lawyers are already circling around the Reiner estate, and even worse, around the story itself. Sally Struthers made a desperate plea yesterday, begging the public not to fall for the spin that's about to start. She said, "Don't let Nick's defense team twist this. Don't let them turn Rob and Michelle into villains." She's terrified they'll claim the parents were controlling or that their concern somehow drove him over the edge. Sally's voice cracked as she warned, "They're going to try to rewrite the truth. Don't let them." We've seen it happen time and time again in high-profile family tragedies. The victim blaming starts before the blood is even dried. And Sally Struthers knows that pattern all too well, which is exactly why she's speaking up now, before the spin can take hold. She said through tears, "Rob was soft. He was too soft. That was his only crime." It's haunting, because she's right. His compassion, the same heart that made him beloved by millions, became the very thing that doomed him. And here's the twist that's already lighting up the industry rumor mill. Tom Cruise is reportedly ready to take the stand if it comes to that. Picturing Tom Cruise standing in a courtroom testifying against the son of his best friend. It would be the trial of the century. But sources close to him say he's prepared to do it, no hesitation. He wants the truth out there, the full timeline of that failed intervention, the warnings, the chances ignored. He wants that jury to understand that Rob Reiner didn't die in confusion or chaos. He died because his son made a series of clear, conscious choices and refused every offer of help. Tom's mission now is simple: make sure Nick never walks free again. But this is where the story gets even darker, the part no one wants to talk about. The truth is, the world watched Nick grow up. He wasn't some unknown figure. He was Hollywood royalty. We saw him smiling on red carpets, sitting next to his famous father, and we all thought the same thing. What a lucky kid. But Sally's revelation flips that image on his head. She said that even as a teenager, there was something in Nick that made people uneasy, a kind of quiet brewing darkness behind his smile. She recalled one story that still chills her. A rap party years ago when a young Nick was found alone in a back room, methodically destroying property, not raging, not screaming, just calmly breaking things one by one like it was nothing. Sally said everyone laughed it off back then, but looking back now, it feels like the first crack in a much darker story. When Rob walked in and found Nick that night at the rap party, there were no tears, no apology, just a chilling smile. Sally said she pulled Rob aside afterward and warned him, "Get him help, Rob, don't wait." And Rob listened. He tried. He found the best doctors money could buy, the top specialists, the most private clinics. But as Sally painfully put it, you can't buy empathy with a checkbook. That line cuts deep, because no amount of money, fame, or influence can fix what someone refuses to feel. Since Sally's interview dropped, Hollywood's reaction has been pure panic. It's sent shockwaves through the industry. People are scrubbing their socials, deleting old photos with Nick, pretending they were never close. The distancing has already begun. But Sally, she's standing her ground. She doesn't care about optics or reputations. She's too old, too tired, and too heartbroken to play along with the silence anymore. She's calling it exactly what it is. She wants the world to see Rob Reiner for what he truly was, not just another Hollywood name gone too soon, but a victim of domestic violence. And that's a label people rarely apply to men, especially powerful, respected ones like him. It forces everyone to face a truth they've ignored, that abuse doesn't care about status, gender, or fame. People kept saying, but he's Rob Reiner. He could have hired bodyguards. He could have kicked Nick out. But love paralyzes. It blinds you. It makes you protect the one person you should fear. The upcoming funeral, sources say, will be extremely private, invite only, with every detail kept under lock and key. And yes, Tom Cruise is once again stepping up. He's reportedly handling the security himself, making sure the event is airtight so that no one connected to Nick or his circle can get anywhere near it. It's not just a farewell anymore, it's protection, even in death. Sally will be speaking at the funeral, and what she plans to do has everyone bracing themselves. She said she has one final letter to read aloud to Rob, a message she never got to deliver while he was alive. She didn't reveal what's inside, only saying it's the conversation we never finished at that lunch 3 weeks ago. That alone is enough to make hearts ache. Whatever those words are, they'll be the goodbye she's been carrying for weeks, raw, unfinished, and real. And buried inside of all of this heartbreak is a brutal truth that's hard to accept: the limits of love. We've been raised on movies, many of them directed by Rob Reiner himself, that taught us love conquers all. If you care enough, if you hold on tight enough, the ending will be happy. But life isn't the Princess Bride. In real life, love doesn't always win. Sometimes loving someone isn't enough to pull them back from their own darkness. Sometimes that love just drags you under with them. And that's the tragedy people never want to talk about. When Sally Struthers decided to speak, she didn't just share memories, she broke a sacred Hollywood silence. She shattered the illusion of the perfect celebrity family, the one fans had idolized for decades. And in doing that, she gave Rob something priceless: his humanity back. In his final moments, he wasn't some untouchable legend or the voice behind decades of film history. He was just a father, scared, exhausted, and still clinging to hope that his love could fix everything.
Now, as the world waits for the trial to begin and detectives piece together every hidden truth from that house of horrors in Brentwood, Sally's voice lingers like an echo. Her words are more than just grief, they're a warning about what happens when silence and love collide, and love loses. Tom Cruise gave the warning. Sally tried to give the warning signs, the same ones Rob and Michelle lived with every single day. This whole story feels like a tragedy of missed exits, moments where things could have been stopped but weren't. At any point, someone could have called the police. At any point, the locks could have been changed, but they weren't. And now all that's left is silence. The silence of a house that once echoed with laughter and life. The silence of a man who still had stories to tell, films to make, and a world to inspire. And then there's Sally Struthers, her voice trembling but powerful, reminding us it didn't have to end this way. Those words haunt every corner of this case. This story is still unfolding, and we're keeping a close watch on what's coming next. Court filings are expected to drop tomorrow morning, and whispers are flying that audio from inside the Reiner home, captured by a smart system like Alexa, may exist. If those recordings surface and the jury hears the final moments between Rob and Michelle Reiner, it could be the moment that seals Nick's fate forever. For now, all we can do is hold our loved ones tighter, check in on our friends who've gone quiet, and remember that the biggest smiles often hide the deepest pain. Life isn't always what it looks like on screen, and this heartbreaking story proves it. Rest in peace, Rob and Michelle Reiner. You both deserved so much better. A kinder ending, a safer home, and the peace you spent your lives giving others. If you were moved by this story, please like, share, comment, and send your condolences to the Reiner family below. Don't forget to subscribe to Velvet Screen Secrets, where we bring you the untold truths behind Hollywood's brightest lights and darkest shadows.